I stand upon my desk to remind myself that we must constantly look at things in a different way. See, the world looks very different from up here.
This is probably the best way to explain a transition from 5-point into 6-point perspective. There's a mirror at the bottom, you see? But if you look at it from the side there, it's just 5-point perspective. And then it becomes 6-point. There's a point in the back and a point in the front. I'll leave y'all in the video. Actually, Retro, I must thank you. Actually, Electron Perspective is a really good video. I think a lot of people struggle with this, so I think it might help other people too. You're confused about 4, 5, and 6 perspective points? I mean, when it gets to 6 and 5 and 6 point perspective, we're talking like, I haven't really looked into it that much even. It's barely used. It's not used that often. Because at that point you're getting to like fisheye lens. And like really spherical. You're starting to mimic a human eye. You don't get the difference between 4 and 5? Okay, I got it. 4-point perspective is like this. So when you look up at something, it will get smaller. Like, let's say this is a skyscraper. Right? Skyscraper. No, this is 4-point. There's one here, one here, one here, and one here. Yeah, this itself is 3-point perspective. See, this is 3-point perspective. Let's say if we drew the windows in. Okay, so this beneath this horizon line, it's like if you were to look down on the ground, right? So this is if you look up into the sky. Let's draw some clouds. If you ignore all of this, it's 3-point perspective because this point doesn't exist, right? So you're right, this is just 3-point perspective. But then, if I was to add some more stuff into this drawing, so let's say we had this is not a skyscraper, this is floating in the sky on a cloud, right? Then if I added another object here, all of a sudden this is 4-point perspective. Does that make sense? The skyscraper is floating on a cloud in the sky. So if you were to look down, let's say that there's planet Earth here. This is 4-point. Five-point perspective, all of these straight perspective lines are curved. And then there's this extra point in the middle, which is what I recommend when you're practicing your boxes, to use this perspective. Does that make sense? So that's 4-point. 6-point, I am pretty sure. Actually, I'm not sure what 6-point is. That's the one I never learned. If you see under the ground, I don't know how to explain. It's 4-point perspective. Yeah, you can think of it that way. But remember, it might not necessarily be seeing under the ground. Because if you think about a time in your life when you look down, okay, try to think of a time in your life when you look up into the sky and things get smaller as they get into the sky. When you look down, things get smaller. Not necessarily when you look down underneath the ground, but when you look down toward your feet. I'll give you an example. So let's say you're standing on a platform. So if you're in this position, if you look up, or if you look down, this is a situation where there would be 4-point perspective. So you're not looking underneath the ground, but you're looking down at the ground. So you're standing on a platform. You see, you're standing, this platform is attached to a building, and you're standing out on this platform looking out into the city. This was 3-point perspective. Everything would be converging to 1 point. So if this was 3-point perspective, these buildings down here would be converging to the same point as these buildings up here, right? This is all going up here. But these lines down here are not going up there. The lines on the bottom are converging to the same point here. And then of course, we have what you know already, the 2-point perspective. So they're converging here and converging here. So together we have 1, 2, 3, 4 points. So, okay, this is a really difficult concept to understand because as humans, we usually look to the left or the right. We're not used to looking up and down. And that's why if you look at buildings in real life, you don't really notice them converging unless it's a skyscraper. For skyscrapers, we're kind of used to things getting smaller as they go up, but we're really not used to looking down and seeing things get smaller. But if you've ever been to a high place, you have looked down and seen things get smaller. So the best way to understand 4-point and 5-point perspective is see it this way. You already understand 2-point perspective, right? You said you understand 2-point perspective. So the best way to explain this, imagine 5-point as flipping a 2-point perspective 90 degrees. So now let's pretend that let's do 2-point perspective again on this picture, because you already understand 2-point, right? Look at this picture as 2-point perspective. You see? These are going the other way, right? It's a little weaker on this side because of how the camera is positioned. If we were to extend this drawing, you would see that it's a lot stronger down here. The perspective is stronger. But it's pretty weak on this side. But it's there. So extend these lines. I'm exaggerating a little just so you understand. These go up, right? So now, I'll do this too to make it really clear for you. So yeah, these are all converging even though it's weak. Now, when we flip it back 90 degrees, see? We've got 4-point perspective. But in real life, there's not a lot of circumstances when we will actually encounter 4-point perspective. You're welcome. I'm so happy you understand now. It's so confusing. I understand. I'm happy that worked. That's how I understood it after really not understanding it. Eyepiece. I need an eyepiece. I need a T-piece. Quick, a T-piece. No, I'm doomed. Nice. Yeah, in real life, there's not a lot of situations where we'll look down and be able to look up as well and notice the perspective, so it's rare to see it. But it does happen sometimes. And you said this looks like 5-point perspective. You're right. It looks a lot like 5-point perspective. And I can explain that I can try to explain that to you as well. The difference. So you know 2-point and 3-point, right? It's pretty clear to you the difference between 2-point perspective and 3-point perspective. Think of it like think of it this way. Oh no, I'm sorry. I messed up. You've got your 2-point perspective. 1 point, that's what I meant to say. You've got your 1-point perspective as well. And 1-point perspective, you've got your happy 1 point. They don't need no one else. Oh, they're happy. Okay, let's draw some cubes here. With 2-point perspective, when we take it to 4-point perspective, it's pretty straightforward, right? So all we have to do is add 2 more vanishing points here, and then we'll get something that looks like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. However, what if we wanted to do the same thing that we have happening in this picture to 1-point perspective? We're gonna start getting into a little more complicated stuff here, but in real life, you'll notice that these perspective lines, pay really close attention to, I don't know, just take a look around the room around you, and you'll realize that these perspective lines are actually kind of curved, except for the horizon. But all these perspective lines are actually slightly curved. And you'll notice this in photos as well. Pay really close attention to photos where the perspective is strong. You'll see that these perspective lines are curvy. So when taking a look at our lovely 1-point perspective box here, guess what? All these straight lines on that box, it's a lie. All these straight lines are actually, in reality, kind of curved lines. These lines are not straight. This is wrong. If you wanted to draw super realistically, these lines are actually supposed to be curved. So what we're gonna do is apply our knowledge of 4-point perspective onto our knowledge of 1-point perspective. Because now we know that all these straight lines are supposed to be slightly curved. But this is how it's different than 4-point perspective, right? Because in 4-point perspective, we don't have this center point going on. There's no need for a center point. All these buildings converge. They're using 2 points on the side. They're not using a center point. And you actually asked a really good question, Retro, like about what's the difference between all these perspective points, like all these, what's the difference between 4, 5, and 6? That's a really good question, and I will blow your brain. I will blow your mind a little bit further in just a second. Mathematics, pretty much 4 plus 1 equals 5, right? And then 2-point perspective, and then we have sideways 2-point perspective. Add that together, and it will give you 4. Yeah, it's math. But okay, what we're gonna do now is apply our knowledge of 4-point perspective onto 1-point perspective. What does that mean? Well, first we'll start with 2-point, right? And we'll add those lines here. I'm gonna exaggerate it just to help you understand it better again, but when you're actually drawing, it's not gonna be this exaggerated. And then we're gonna do our little rotating thing here that I showed you earlier. We'll do our little rotating thing. Hold on. And add our 2 more points to make 4-point perspective. Right? So now we have our beautiful 5 points, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hiding in the background. So this is 5-point. And what we've done is added this 1-point perspective. We've added in our 4-point perspective way of thinking to this box. And now this box's lines will change a little bit if we're following our new perspective points. The lines converging to this point here will be straight. To this 1 point, the lines will be straight. But the lines converging to those 2 points there are going to be curvy. So let me turn down my guide layers. We'll have a box that looks something like this. And see, this will be converging to 1 point here, as well as 1 point here, as well as 1 point at the top, as well as 1 point on the bottom. And we'll also have a bunch of lines converging to a point in the back here. And that is 5-point perspective. While this drawing here is only 4-point perspective, because this 5th point is nowhere to be found in this drawing. So we're talking about all these types of perspectives: 1 point, 2 point, 3 point, 4 point, 5 point, 6 point, which I actually forget what it means. But in reality, once you get past 6 points, it doesn't really make a difference. In fact, in this picture here, I lied to you. This is not 4-point perspective. Well, it is, but actually there's more than 4 points. And this confused me for the longest time ever. I was so confused about this. I was like, wait, people are telling me that this is 4-point perspective, but why are there more than 4 perspective points in this drawing? It's because there's actually an infinite amount of perspective points in real life. At a certain point, how many perspective points there are becomes arbitrary. There's actually infinite amount of perspective points. The main thing to take away, I would say, is to see perspective points more as an indicator of curved perspective, or like just perspective where all the lines in an object are straight. 6-point perspective, I'm pretty sure at least 5-point is definitely one you see every single day in your daily life. It's just really difficult to notice it. If you sit back a little bit and try to widen your gaze, you'll have a really, 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 really slight 4-point or 5-point perspective to everything. It's just really difficult to notice it because it's not dramatic. Little character pencil with blender grease pencil! Blender grease pencil! Blender grease pencil is one of the coolest things on earth. Blender grease pencil is so cool. Yeah. There's so many things you can do with blender grease pencil. I can't wait to see what people come up with in the future. Whoa, wait. Wait. Did they actually rig that? Did they? They rigged it? That's insane. So far, what we've explored 2-point perspective. We've explored 4-point perspective by adding up and down. Lines converging when you look up and when you look down. So when you want to make 6-point perspective, you can ask yourself, what do you have to add to these two? So this is 4. What do you have to add to this to make it 6-point perspective? This is 3-point perspective. And then to make this into 4-point, we added it to the bottom, top to bottom. And now it's 4-point. So to make 6-point from 5-point, we're gonna duplicate this point in the distance. So this point here is this point here, the 5th point. And we're gonna put that to the opposite side, which is behind us. It's pretty crazy stuff. Think of this as a window. This drawing is a window in an apartment building or something. So if someone was standing outside of this window and looking in, they would see this 6 perspective point out in the distance. Kind of like how we're seeing this 5th perspective point right now. 6 point will probably be actually more like here. So, okay, so we already know for 5-point perspective, right? How it works. It's the same thing. So number 5 is here. Number 1. Number 2 is probably somewhere here. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. The 6 point is behind us, and we are actually the dividing line. We actually never see things curve towards the 6 point, so this is not 6-point perspective. This is just 5-point perspective. But the concept of the 6 point being outside of the drawing is totally true. So this is what we've covered already, right? 1 point, 2 point, 3 point, 4 point, 5 point. And 6 point is a sphere. They're showing both sides of a sphere. And that is 6-point perspective. So they're showing both sides of that window I mentioned, right? I mentioned how there's a window and you can look through the window through both sides. They're showing the view from this side of the window as well as this side of the window, which makes a sphere. And that is why we have 360 degree video. Half of a sphere is 5-point perspective. The perspective points being at the top of the sphere, at the bottom of the sphere, at the left side of the sphere, at the right side of the sphere, and towards the center of the sphere. When we're actually drawing something or taking a photo of something, we're actually just taking a photo of a portion of this sphere, which is why it appears a lot flatter and less curved. And that's also why very, very rarely do we ever even go into 4-point perspective, because oftentimes we're up here in 3-point perspective, or down here in 3-point perspective, or we're just here in 1-point perspective chilling. Very rarely do we see the whole picture in real life. Help! You finally asked for help. It's so difficult to understand a 3D concept in 2D space when you're just starting out. Here's the thing. There's a huge leap that people gloss over when it comes to moving from 4-point perspective into 5-point perspective. There's a huge leap. There's actually a huge dividing line in knowledge right here. Right here. This is when things move into 3D. So the sphere they're talking about here, think of it basically as a globe. You know, like one of those globes you use for social studies? And you can spin it? That's what this is. And if you can't spin the globe, that's what this is. And you enjoy sending help or you see it. I do have some sadistic personality traits, I'm not gonna lie. This is what helped me understand perspective. Before this, I did not understand what perspective was. It seemed like a foreign concept that had no connection to real life. This guy here is terms. I think that's how you spell the name. His name is Dick Terms. And this is a term sphere. This is 5-point perspective, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. However, as soon as we can spin the sphere around and see the other side of the sphere, it turns into a 6-point perspective. Because suddenly we have access to the 6th point, which is hidden.
But anyway, the work that I've been doing for quite a number of years, actually over 40 years now, is spherical art, which came from little ceiling motors, like they're little ceiling motors.
Yeah, only 5-point except for one special case scenario, which I will show you.
Think about is, I imagine I'm in the ball, looking out north, east, south, west, up and down, creating capturing a scene that's all around me. And then when I'm all done painting it, then I move to the outside to look at it. And so this shows like a complete city around you. But it's also designed to show how perspective works. Like that's a little 1-point perspective is when you think of the total scene that's going on.
Right?
This is the bottom.
This is perspective.
And this is the top.
In a 3D object. This is probably the best way to explain a transition from 5-point into 6-point perspective. There's a mirror at the bottom, you see? But if you look at it from the side, there's just 5-point perspective. And then it becomes 6-point. There's a point in the back and a point in the front.
Still straight line perspective.
This is 6-point perspective, but it's straight line perspective, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah. All the lines project to points, the 3 different points of the octahedron. So this is an interesting study that comes from my termospheres that I do, but it shows how it can go back to the octahedron and to a flat design and straight line design.
And then I think to just wrap things up, I'll show you the one exception where you don't need a 3D object to draw in 6-point perspective. But as you see, it's not used much in art unless you're drawing technical art, like for architecture.